Ethan Cole had spent most of his life believing that peace was something you earned by staying small, staying silent, and staying far away from people who carried storms inside them. His ranch sat alone on the edge of the Red Plains, where the wind spoke louder than men and the sunsets burned like quiet confessions across the sky. Ethan liked it that way. He was a man carved by routine, wake before dawn, coffee black and bitter, boots worn but clean, horses fed before himself. He wasn't lonely, he told himself. He was just finished with chaos. That was why, when the town pastor suggested marriage, Ethan didn't laugh. He didn't smile either. He simply nodded. A wife, he reasoned, would be practical. Someone calm. Someone grateful. Someone who would cook, keep the house warm, maybe hum softly while the evening settled in. Not love. Not passion. Just order. He had lost enough in his life to stop believing in wild happiness. The arrangement came together quietly. No courtship worth mentioning. Just letters exchanged through the pastor, words polite and distant. Her name was Mara. That was all Ethan knew. No photograph. No description. The pastor said she had a past, but didn't elaborate. Ethan didn't ask. Everyone had a past. What mattered was the future, steady, predictable, manageable. He imagined her arriving in a modest dress, eyes lowered, voice soft. A woman who would fit into his life without rearranging it. He prepared the house with careful precision. A new quilt on the bed. Extra firewood stacked neatly. A chair placed opposite his at the table, not too close, not too far. He practiced saying her name aloud once, just to hear how it sounded in the room. Mara. It echoed strangely, like a challenge he didn't yet understand. The day she arrived, the sky was bruised with storm clouds. Ethan waited by the fence as the stagecoach rolled in, dust and rain mixing in the air. The driver climbed down first, glanced back, then hesitated. That should have been Ethan's first warning. When she stepped down, everything he had imagined collapsed in an instant. Mara was not modest. She wore a weathered leather jacket over a faded dress, boots scuffed and stained with travel. Her hair was untamed, dark curls escaping a loose braid, whipped by the wind like they refused obedience. She stood tall, eyes sharp and unafraid, scanning the land as if measuring it, not asking permission to belong. When her gaze met Ethan's, she didn't look away. She studied him, slowly, like she was deciding something important. Not a thank you in her eyes. Not relief. But fire. Ethan felt it hit him like a sudden heat in the cold air. You Ethan Cole? She asked. Her voice wasn't soft. It carried gravel and strength, like it had been used to shout over storms. Yes, he replied, stiffly. You must be. Mara, she said, cutting him off. I know. She lifted her bag herself, heavy by the way her shoulders tightened, and started walking toward the ranch without. Waiting for instruction. Ethan stood frozen for a second too long. This was not what he had agreed to. This woman didn't look like someone who would fold into his quiet life. She looked like someone who would tear it open. As they walked, she asked questions, about the land, the horses, the water supply, practical, sharp questions. Not once did she ask about the house, the kitchen, or what he expected of her. By the time they reached the porch, Ethan's carefully built sense of control had begun to crack. Inside, Mara paused, taking in the space. Instead of praising it, she frowned slightly. Too clean, she said. Looks like no one lives here. That comment landed deeper than she could have known. Dinner was tense. Ethan spoke little. Mara ate like someone who had known hunger, fast but not careless. When he finally told her where things were and what he expected, simple meals, quiet evenings, no trouble, she laughed. Not cruelly. Not mockingly. But honestly. You didn't marry a shadow, Ethan, she said. And I didn't come here to disappear. Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. Outside, thunder rolled. That night, Ethan lay awake listening to the wind batter the walls. From the other room, he heard Mara moving, restless steps, the creak of the floor, the sound of a window opening. Something about her presence unsettled him, stirred memories he had buried, his mother's laughter before illness took her, his sister's wild dreams before tragedy ended them, the promise he made to himself to never let chaos live with him again. He had wanted a simple bride. Instead, he had invited a storm into his home. And though he would never admit it aloud, a part of him, long silent and starved, felt awake for the first time in years. As the rain fell harder, Ethan stared at the ceiling and wondered a terrifying thought: what if this wild woman didn't ruin his life, but forced him to finally live it? Morning came harsh and bright after the storm, sunlight cutting across the ranch as if exposing secrets the night had tried to hide. Ethan rose early, as always, but the routine that once anchored him now felt disrupted. The house was already alive. He smelled coffee, stronger than he liked, and heard movement outside. When he stepped onto the porch, he froze. Mara was in the corral, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, calmly speaking to his most temperamental horse, a black stallion no hired hand had ever managed without a fight. Ethan's heart jumped into his throat as the horse lowered its head, snorted once, then stood still while Mara placed a steady hand on its neck. She didn't dominate it. She didn't fear it. She understood it. Something deep in Ethan cracked right then, a realization that this woman carried a language he had never learned but desperately needed. When she noticed him watching, she didn't smile. "He's angry," she said simply. "Not dangerous." Big difference. Ethan had spent years thinking the same thing about himself. The days that followed were not peaceful, but they were alive. Mara refused to stay inside. She helped with fencing, rode hard, argued when she disagreed, and laughed loud when she found something funny. Townfolk whispered. "That woman isn't right," they said. "Too wild. Too much." Ethan heard it all. At first, it embarrassed him. Then it angered him. Slowly, something unfamiliar rose in his chest, not fear, not control, but pride. Mara challenged him constantly. When he shut down emotionally, she called him out. When he tried to silence her fire, she reminded him he had chosen her. "You didn't marry calm," she said one night by the fire. "You married truth." And truth, Ethan learned, was uncomfortable. It forced him to remember the boy he once was, the one who dreamed, who loved deeply, who believed life could be more than survival. But storms always return. One afternoon, a man rode into town looking for Mara. Ethan found out the truth then. Her past wasn't small. She had escaped abuse, broken free from a life where obedience meant pain and silence meant survival. She had fought. She had run. And she had promised herself never to belong to anyone who wanted to cage her. When Ethan confronted her, his voice shook, not with anger, but fear. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Mara met his eyes, wounded but unbowed. "Because people don't marry women like me for who we are," she said softly. "They marry us hoping we'll change." The words hit Ethan harder than any blow. That night, he stood at the edge of the ranch, staring into the dark, realizing the cruel irony. He had asked for simple because he was afraid. Afraid of losing. Afraid of loving. Afraid of being broken again. The man returned, violent and drunk, demanding Mara come back. Before Ethan could react, Mara stepped forward, spine straight, voice steady. But Ethan moved too, placing himself between her and the past she had escaped. His hands trembled, but he didn't step aside. For the first time in years, he chose chaos over comfort, courage over control. The confrontation ended without blood, but not without transformation. When the dust settled, Mara collapsed into tears she had held back for years, and Ethan held her, not to own her, not to tame her, but to stand with her. In that moment, both of them understood, love was not quiet. Love was brave. Life on the ranch changed. Not into something easier, but into something real. They argued. They healed. They learned. Ethan learned that peace doesn't come from silence, but from truth shared. Mara learned that strength doesn't mean standing alone forever. Together, they built something neither had expected, not a simple life, but a meaningful one. The town slowly stopped whispering. The ranch thrived. And at sunset, when the wind moved through the plains, Ethan no longer feared it. He welcomed it. Because the wild woman who came into his life didn't destroy his world, she gave it color, depth, and purpose. Years later, when asked how a man like him ended up with a woman like her, Ethan would smile and say, "I thought I wanted peace. Turns out, I needed courage." And Mara, standing beside him, would squeeze his hand, free and unbroken. If this story moved you, if you believe love, courage, and transformation still matter, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. These stories are more than entertainment, they're reminders that the life you're afraid of might be the one that saves you. Stay with us, because the next story might just change you too.